2018. Just 20 years ago, we were agreeing the Good Friday Agreement. 4 years ago, we were asking Scotland if they wanted to leave the United Kingdom, and they said no. 2 years ago, we were asking the UK if it wanted to remain or leave in the European Union, and they said they wanted to leave. But now, all those things have come into question. But 2017 wasn't great either. We had terrorism, we had the divorce settlement, which included having to pay £39 billion to the EU. We had a failed election by a weak Prime Minister, and we still had that weak Prime Minister in charge. Nobody won that election, and we were coming from a very unhappy place, and it was about to get a lot more unhappy.
Year, new team. That was her plan as she arrived this morning to begin her long-anticipated reshuffle.
January was the month of cabinet reshuffles, NHS turmoil and the war on plastic waste. As the number of rough sleepers was increasing, a leaked document was showing that no matter what kind of Brexit was agreed, Britain would be worse off. But May was more interested in stopping plastic waste than delivering Brexit. Our politics was due to recycle the same arguments from 2016 all over again. By February, the NHS situation got even worse, with hospitals reporting their worst ever A&E performance, with only 77.1% of patients treated within 4 hours in January. As Toys R Us and Maplin went into administration, the country was covered in a blanket of snow, causing severe disruption. The country was frozen in time with empty shops and halfway between Brexit turmoil. Allegations of anti-Semitism in the Labour Party were rife. He was commenting on anti-Semitic Facebook posts. He was laying wreaths where he shouldn't have been. Corbyn was certainly an anti-Zionist, but an anti-Semitic? But it took until September this year for Labour to adopt a full definition of anti-Semitism. But it wasn't Corbyn who was the main villain this year. It was the other woman, that stupid woman, as he put it, Theresa May. It was Salisbury, where the biggest non-Brexit event of the year would take place. Novichock. On the 3rd of March 2018, Sergei and Julia Skripal entered Zizi's restaurant in Salisbury. They entered at 3:30. By 4:30, the emergency services were being called. By 10:30 the next day, media outlets knew that it was the Russians behind the attack, but they couldn't report on it with only one source of information. But Russia had brilliantly highlighted the competencies of both the Foreign Office and the Home Office to protect us from foreign attacks. Russia had brilliantly thrown a spanner in the works amidst a country dealing with Brexit. The following attacks in Amesbury continued to threaten the nation and just showed how difficult it was to control this foreign power. But surprisingly, Russia was not our biggest enemy this year. The EU rejected Theresa May's proposals for mutual recognition of standards between the UK and the EU, and ruled out Britain's membership of European regulators such as the European Medicines Agency. March was also the month that Channel 4 launched their documentary on Cambridge Analytica, detailing how data was manipulated to persuade voters into voting for Trump and Brexit. March was the month of corruption and scandal. Nothing was trustworthy after this month. By April, as the national living wage for people over 25 was increasing, it was found to be of little assurance, as it was discovered that you were more likely to be murdered in London than in New York. By the 17th, Theresa May was apologising about Windrush. It's weird to have an event in the midst of Brexit that is in favour of immigrants. Perhaps it shows the way that we're going as a country, or perhaps it just shows that the government cannot run its own departments anymore, being so preoccupied with Brexit. The government was found to be deporting Caribbean migrants who had been here for years. In an interview with the Home Affairs Select Committee, Amber Rudd said that she did not have targets for deporting migrants.
We don't have targets for removals.
But a leaked document to The Guardian showed that there was. How this leak got there, we can only speculate. She seems to think that civil servants working against her leaked the document to The Guardian, and so she was forced to resign. Now we know there are people who work against Amber Rudd. Boris Johnson perhaps. We can only speculate. By the 18th, May was defeated twice in the House of Lords. The first one to force the negotiation of a customs union between the UK and the EU, and one to ensure that EU rights remain UK law. The ability of the government to feel the benefits of Brexit and make real change was lessening. As Prince Louis was born, Amber Rudd was resigning. April went from very cold to suddenly very hot. The weather was hotting up. We were having things to look forward to again. England were doing well at the World Cup and we had a royal wedding, but it didn't mean Brexit had stopped. It just meant we'd been distracted for a while. The local elections saw losses to the Conservatives and gains for Labour. 3 votes took place in the House of Commons on the issue of Brexit. In the first, peers voted to remove the exit date of the 29th of March 2019 from the Withdrawal bill in order to give more time for the negotiations. In the second, they voted to retain UK membership of EU agencies such as Euratom. In the third, they voted to give MPs a chance to vote on remaining in the European Economic Area, which would enable the UK to access the single market. But we were all distracted by the royal wedding. Trump wanted to abolish the Iranian nuclear agreement, but Boris wanted it. The government was making promises to reduce the stakes on fixed odds betting terminals. May was the month of defeat. By June, the government was approving a 3rd runway at Heathrow. Tommy Robinson was held for contempt of court for filming outside a grooming gang case. Which brings us neatly on to UKIP and their association with racism and the far right. So earlier this year, UKIP leader Henry Bolton and his girlfriend were accused of racism against Meghan Markle, amongst other people, and so he was forced to resign as UKIP leader. So Gerard Batten took the role as UKIP leader. Now UKIP, the party that created Brexit, the party that was essential to a lot of what was going on right now with Brexit. Meanwhile, Tommy Robinson, this guy that was a former English Defence League leader, was being arrested for contempt of court for filming outside a case of Muslim paedophile gangs. He was trying to highlight the disparity between the way in which the establishment covers up these Muslim paedophile gangs and the amount the mainstream media talks about these things. Now the mainstream media can't talk about these things because there was an injunction against the case, and therefore Tommy Robinson was breaking the law by reporting this case even though this injunction was opposed, and therefore he was arrested and sent to prison. And so people got angry because it seemed like the establishment was trying to cover up this case of Muslim rape gangs in the UK, and the entire establishment was against the right in favour of leftist politics that favoured these Muslim rape gangs. And so that led to the support from UKIP leader Gerard Batten of Tommy Robinson, and Gerard eventually appointed Tommy to be the UKIP advisor to this whole Muslim rape gang and Muslim culture saga that threatens the UK. But that angered many UKIP people such as Paul Mussol and Nigel Farage, who eventually quit the party. They didn't want their party associated with racism and the far right. Let's face it, Tommy Robinson is a man who happily this year supported the bullying of a Syrian refugee in school.
A young girl was beaten badly by Muslim girls. While those Muslim girls were beating her up, Jamal was involved.
In an attempt on Facebook to vilify the victim of this bullying case that happened earlier in November. This is a man who has been arrested for thuggish behaviour, assault, This is a man who is not liked by the mainstream media, who receives complaints every time he attends a mainstream media interview. And this is a man who is labelled by the mainstream media as far right. So associating a mainstream political party with the far right ultimately is going to lose votes from people who associate themselves with the left. And so, with one man who is fearful of Muslims, UKIP, the party who created Brexit, ended up diminishing its reputation. By the 13th, the Commons was also fighting back. By 327 votes to 126, the House of Commons rejected a Lord's amendment to the EU Withdrawal Bill, which had attempted to keep the UK in the European Economic Area after Brexit. Other changes made to the bill were also overturned, including a requirement to negotiate a customs union with the EU. Tory MP Sir Christopher Show blocked a bill to make upskirting a criminal offence. Trump was separating immigrant families from children, which May condemned. Wildfires were spreading and 100,000 people were marching in favour of the People's Vote. And England was actually doing well at the World Cup. June was definitely a month of victory. That victory for England at the World Cup continued into July as we won a penalty shootout. But there was more Novichock exposure in Salisbury. Theresa May secured approval from the cabinet to negotiate the Chequers deal. This included proposals to create a new UK-EU free trade area, the ending of free movement but with a new mobility framework for UK and EU citizens, and the ending of jurisdiction of the European Court of Justice, but with the UK paying regard to its decisions in areas where common rules are enforced. England lost their semi-final against Croatia. David Davis and Boris Johnson resigned. Enter Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson. Now, Boris Johnson wanted a Canada Plus style deal. Amber Rudd wanted a Norway Plus style deal. She was Home Secretary, he was Foreign Secretary. He was saying that we had wrapped a suicide vest around British business. Fuck business, said the man who was Foreign Secretary. When Theresa May's Chequers deal was announced, he resigned in protest. Later in October, he was rising up, a powerful leader to the Tory party conference, saying how that he wanted to chuck Chequers. But, he said, he wanted to back Theresa May and extend Article 50 so he could renegotiate the deal. He soon lost his popularity in the polls. The Trump blimp was flown over Westminster in protest to Trump's visit. Vote Leave was fined for breaking electoral law. Cliff Richards won £210,000 against the BBC. Michel Barnier rejected the UK's proposals to collect customs duties on its behalf. And so, if June was the month of victory, July was definitely the month of defeat. By August, Boris was making burqa jibes in an article for the Daily Telegraph. As the high street was failing, Mike Ashley of Sports Direct bought out the House of Fraser. The government published a first in a series of guidelines for businesses and the public on how to prepare in the event of a no-deal Brexit scenario. As KSI and Logan Paul were fighting it out, Alex Salmond was resigning amid sexual misconduct claims. But considering Brexit was supposed to be happening, August was a very sparse month for Brexit news.
By the time the autumn came, cabinet ministers were resigning. The country looked desolate. May's Chequers plan looked dead, and it looked like we were going nowhere. Still seems like we are.
By the 3rd of September, SNP membership had overtaken the Conservatives. Russian nationals who poisoned in Salisbury were named and shamed. Theresa May was getting her deal rejected in Salzburg. The European Union either wanted to create a border down the Irish Sea or put Northern Ireland inside a customs union. Either way, there was no solution to getting the UK out of the European Union and keeping a free border in Northern Ireland. The contaminated blood scandal inquiry went underway, and Comcast took over Sky. But where was Brexit? By October, heterosexual couples had won the right to enter civil partnerships. The government posted adverts for civil emergency workers to handle any disruption caused by Brexit in 2019. John Bercow announced that he would step down in the summer of 2019. By the 18th, Theresa May was suggesting that the transition period could be extended after a summit of EU leaders in Brussels failed to make decisive progress. A march through Central Europe demanding a second vote on the final Brexit deal attracted 700,000 people. Leicester City owner's helicopter crashed. But still, no news on Brexit. November, the National Crime Agency launched an investigation into Aaron Vance and Vote Leave. Joe Johnson resigned from cabinet and called for a second referendum. The UK was marking the 100th anniversary of the end of the First World War. Then the news that she did it. She'd actually come up with a Brexit withdrawal agreement. Cabinet agreed it, but then Dominic Raab and Esther McVey resigned. The pound fell sharply. Amber Rudd returned to cabinet. The Chancellor of the Exchequer, Philip Hammond, announced that all forms of Brexit will make the UK worse off. The Bank of England predicted that in the aftermath of a no deal, the UK economy would shrink by 8%. Sam Gyimah resigned and May's deal looked dead. November, the month of death. December. By December, the government confirmed it would not use the EU's Galileo space program. The government failed to publish the Attorney General's full and legal advice on the Brexit withdrawal agreement. They were found in contempt of Parliament and were forced to publish the advice. It revealed, as many had thought, that the Irish backstop could lead the UK into a permanent customs union. So May tried to delay the parliamentary vote.
So bring on the astute and eloquent Jacob Rees-Mogg. This was a man tipped to beat May in the next leadership election. He just needed the leadership election to happen. So when May announced that she had negotiated a deal with the European Union and Cabinet had agreed it, he handed in his letter of no confidence. But it didn't quite go to plan for Mr. Mogg. Instead, there wasn't enough letters for her to get the vote of no confidence passed through. He had to wait until she deferred the vote. And even then, she still won that vote of no confidence amongst her party. He was trying to get her to resign, still saying that she should resign. And then he changed his mind all of a sudden when the Labour Party stood up and called for a vote of no confidence on the Prime Minister, on the entire Conservative Party. His job was under threat. He was suddenly backing May. Oh dear, how embarrassing.
And well, if we can learn any lesson from this year, it's that this toing and froing is likely to continue into the next.
May was the woman who came up with Chequers, who took over negotiations from Dominic Raab and David Davis, and who came up with a deal that Parliament looks like they're going to vote down. She deferred that vote, so we'll not know this year if they're going to vote it down. She was going to have a debate with Jeremy Corbyn. That got cancelled when it was found out that the ITV debate that Jeremy Corbyn wanted was not the debate that she would agree to. She was only going to agree to a BBC debate where she gets asked questions from audience members. This was a woman that faced a no confidence vote this year by her own party. But she won that no confidence vote because the Tory party was so afraid of losing power, and the leader of the opposition, Jeremy Corbyn, can't properly oppose her. So she stays. She's our Prime Minister. And we have to get a deal, or a no deal, or a second referendum, whatever you prefer, with her. If 2018 was a year of losers, 2019, I'm afraid, isn't going to be great either. We have a deal to reach by March. Parliament will vote on it in January, but it's likely to get rejected. What does that mean? No deal, second referendum? We don't know, but it won't be a year full of bells and whistles, a year to celebrate or a year to rejoice over. This won't be the Independence Day parade that Brexit was supposed to be. This will probably be a very disappointing, very sad, very uncomfortable, and very dislikable year full of leaders that we don't like and politics that we don't want. But we can rejoice in the fact that Brexit will eventually, one day, end. But it's only going to get worse before it gets better. If it gets better at all.
But do you agree with me? Join in the debate below and subscribe.